Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a licensed therapist, author, and mental health advocate. On today's show, we have a wonderful conversation with comedic duo, the Sklar Brothers, which we can't wait for you to hear. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maylard. How you doing, Duck?
I'm good, man. We just finished that interview and it was a real treat for me. I told you I've been a fan of the Sklar Brothers for a really long time. And so the weird confluence of events that allowed them to come on as guests I'm just super jazzed about it because they're like comedy heroes of mine. Really cool guys.
It is. It's cool when that happens. I mean, it's one thing to have somebody on who's talented and successful and even somebody that you admire within the field that you work in. And
this keeps falling down. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. But it's another thing when it's somebody who is literally somebody that had an impact on you and your life, which it sounds like they have.
Well, only because we talk about it a lot in the interview that they sort of, I'm envious of them that they found a niche to carve out so early in their careers. You know, they found this connection between sports and comedy that not a lot of people were doing. And it was so unique to me that even before I knew that I was longing for something like that for myself, it struck a chord with me where I was like, wow, these guys know who they are. And they were like, we're going to lean into this as opposed to trying to, have a scattergun approach where you just try to do anything and everything to get your face out there. They found a lane and they stuck with it. It's admirable.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning them early on when we talked about starting a podcast in terms of like, they figured out how to do it right early on. Like they were pioneers.
Yeah. They were very early in the not just the comedy podcasting, but just podcasting in general. And their first podcast, Sklar Bro Country, started in 2010, which, I mean, it was Bill Simmons and it was, maybe even Joe Rogan had a podcast at that point, but I mean, like it was a pretty barren landscape. And those guys were very early adopters. They understood that, I always said this to them as they were leaving, that like back in the day, comics used to, if you're playing Cleveland, you fly into Cleveland and then that morning you go on the morning zoo show and you promote the show. Now it's every comedian has a podcast. So they go on and they say, I'll be at the Comedy Store tonight and it's like they were like, hey, this is a tool that we can use not only to develop our comedy, but to help our career and our brand. So they were ahead of the curve. They knew what they were doing.
It was kind of funny in our conversation, which I won't give too much away. We were mindful, of course, they're the twin duo comedy group, right? And we talked about that and the dynamic and identity and a lot of that stuff. But I found at certain points that you and I were like almost twinning.
Yeah.
Like we started kind of like responding with the same word at the same time. And I was like, is that just happening organic? Do we normally do that? Or is that just happening because we're mirroring?
Or it's like when you're talking to someone with a British accent and you're like, right, yeah. I think that too. Like you start to pick up on their mannerisms. Who knows?
Yeah,
it's hard to avoid. I mean, those guys have such a rhythm and have such it's not just finishing each other's sentences, as the old joke goes. It's like their brains really work so quickly with it. I mean, any comedian who's worth his salt who can do crowd work and improv in the moment, they've already honed those skills. But to do it with two people having the same instinct, they were talking about this show Tag It that they do where, comics will do their set and then Randy and Jason will watch the set and take notes on jokes that they could add on. So if you have a joke, then you say, after the laughter dies down, you throw another joke out on top of it, a tag. And they so often come up with the exact same joke because their minds work and it's such a finely tuned machine. It's really impressive that they...
Well, I've heard about singers that are related. There's something that happens that you skip over a whole lifetime of just building chemistry with someone when you grow up together or you have the same blood, sister groups or brother groups, when they sing harmonies together.
Oh, really?
There's like obviously your tone is probably going to be more complementary if you have the same DNA, but also just the timing and how you sing together. You look at like the Jackson 5, for instance, or I remember actually talking to Hanson about this. Didn't tour with them, but they were big fans of Maroon 5 in the early days and they would come to our shows and we hung out with them a lot. And they were like, yeah, we were like, 4, 5, 6 years old. And it was just like the timing and the tone was already there in terms of singing together because we sang together as kids. And you can't really teach that, you could study and become more efficient in terms of your rhythm and stuff like that. Right. But just that natural thing that happens between siblings,
Yeah.
especially twins, I would imagine.
And not even to extend the sports metaphor too, but it's like any team can run a pick and roll. But the Golden State Warriors have been doing it for 10 years. So Draymond knows exactly where Steph's going to be. He doesn't even have to look. You know, there's a routine that after you've been doing it so long that you just know what the other one is going to be doing. You don't even have to think about it. And Randy and Jason are the epitome of that.
Well, it's amazing to see in action. It reminds me, you know, being in a band, I think that I took it for granted, the magic that happens when you do have good chemistry with people that you're working with. You know, you hit a certain stride and there's something going on in the room when you're playing together or whatever you're doing together that goes beyond just the level of talent that you have or anything tangible. It just, you can kind of feel in the air that something is gelling and that it's happening in real time organically because you have this synergy and this chemistry. So when you see that, whether it's a comedic duo or an athlete or a musician, it's like, oh yeah, you can't even really describe what that is.
And it's one of those things that, you know, if you say, I don't know if I've ever had that, well, then you haven't had it. You'll know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like my wife and I, when she will, even texting, like she'll text something and there'll be a typo and we both are racing to get the same exact joke out about the typo. You know, it's like, you know exactly what the person's going to say. You can anticipate it because you have that connection with them. And so, you know, if you have that, like I said, you know it. There's no doubt. Like, maybe I have that. Like, yeah, you do. So
how you doing, man? How you doing in general?
Well, it's been a trying kind of couple of months, both in the world, in my career, in my life, and just the stuff that we always talk about. I find myself really struck lately by the phenomenon in our world today where we have now equated ignorance with weakness. And what I mean by that is we used to have the confidence, self-confidence, whatever, to be able to say, I don't know that. And I'm going to defer to the person who does know that, you know? And
so admitting ignorance.
Sorry, not just having ignorance, but admitting. We have equated, not we, but society for some reason has equated admitting ignorance with weakness. And I think there's such a fear of showing weakness in today's society that we see people assigned to jobs that they know they do not have the specialty for, you know? And we often talk about not trying to be too political, but just from a social standpoint and as a mental health professional, to see someone who's not really qualified to be a health secretary dictating health policy for this country is terrifying, you know? And I'm curious what your thoughts of that are as like someone in the medical field who now has to maybe live by a certain standards, you know, whether it's medication, whether it's, you know, certain things we can and can't say. Like, how does that affect you? How do you feel about that?
Well, first, I would say what you're describing in terms of the fear of admitting ignorance, which leads you to then be boastful and pretend like you know things you don't. You then end up willfully ignorant.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a big pet peeve of mine. It has been. This isn't something that started recently. Whenever I see that, it's like when you've realized you don't know everything, which we all do at some point, you have a choice. And that choice is either to admit you don't know something and use it as the impetus to learn, or to double down and to say, well, I feel that it's true, therefore it is true. Yeah. Or to say, oh, I don't give a shit about that information. You know, I'm keeping it real. Yeah. As Chris Rock said. You know, real dumb. You know, and that's a choice that you're making then. And maybe not a conscious choice. Maybe it's just your ego making a choice where it's like, well, I don't want to admit that I don't know. So I'm going to pretend like I do know. Yeah. And that drives me nuts because then you're really willfully rejecting logic and reason. And the mindset that we talk about on the show, and I talk a lot about when I speak, is being curious. You know, being curious and being open to new information. I think that's something that we're losing even more. It's always been a problem, but we're lacking a lot. And in particular, when we're talking about science, we're talking about things that
they're empirically proven facts.
Yeah. And look, science doesn't have necessarily all the answers. And there are things that we thought we knew and we end up realizing we didn't know everything. But the only way we continue to grow and learn more is by empirically studying things and using data and not rejecting the new information.
And here's the thing, not to interrupt you, the people who do that research are thrilled when they find out they're wrong,
Right.
because it's more data.
More data. Yeah.
People who research, there seems to be this belief that like, well, no, that was proven wrong. Like scientists would be like, that's awesome that we thought Pluto was a planet and now we know it's not. Like, that's great. That's more information. It's not something to be denied or something to be, it drives me so nuts. It reminds me of, this is such a weird comparison, but this is your high culture moment for the day on Hard to Breathe podcast. There's an opera by Gilbert and Sullivan called The Mikado. And the concept of the Mikado is that the emperor of Japan has made flirting illegal. And so anybody who flirts or even like looks at a woman who isn't his wife is going to be beheaded. And the way this little town in the Mikado decided to combat this ridiculous mandate was that they made the next guy on death row the executioner. So the only way he could carry out his job is to cut off his own head. So it was this way that they could sort of ignorantly be like, well, we can't do it because, and it feels like that's what we do. We're putting the people who literally don't have the expertise or the ability to carry out their job in charge of the very job that requires expertise. And it blows my mind, and it infuriates me as a guy who loves order and who loves justice and things done right and wrong, to see so many people being hurt in this country by the flippant, be like, we'll let this guy make policy. We'll make this guy decide. Drives me fucking crazy.
Well, I feel like it's the inevitable outgrowth of the information age, ironically, that we live in, because the idea of the information age and the digital age is that there's more information available, and therefore, like democracy, the more ideas, the more information, the cream will rise to the top, and the best ideas will win out because everyone has all the information at their behest. They can access any information that they need. But we didn't anticipate the fact that with all of that information out there, who's fact checking all of it? Whose authority is saying something is right or something is wrong? It used to be that in order to read something in an encyclopedia or to see it on the headline of the New York Times or the Washington Post, it had to be true. It had to be fact checked. It had to be agreed upon by all sources. If you heard it on the nightly news, it was fact, more or less. I mean, with things, they had to, of course, correct it. If something was misprinted that was wrong, they had to go back and correct it. Otherwise, you'd lose your journalistic integrity, right? But now it's like the pace at which information gets out there, there's no time for that. And so you look at something that somebody sent on your feed on Instagram or TikTok, or you're hearing someone talking about it, just giving an opinion or just talking out of their ass on a political show, and nobody's correct. I mean, somebody could argue against it, but it's already out there, and then 50 other people are saying it, and enough people say it, it just becomes the truth.
Right.
And
so it isn't the truest fact, it's just the loudest fact.
Right. And it's kind of, we're all living in these little bubbles because the algorithm is giving us that thing over and over and over again. Once you go, oh, I like that, even doesn't matter whether it's true or not, it resonates with me. And that'll give you 50 more things that are just like it. And so it's just like exactly the setup of creating a cult where you isolate someone and you only bombard them with the information that, proves your point or supports the kind of control that you're trying to impose over their thinking. It's called brainwashing or gaslighting. And we're all living in that now. It doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum. We're all victims of a digital informational world in which the information that we're getting is tailored towards things that we already believe or things that we feel as opposed to what the facts and the data say. And so I think that where we're at and what you're describing is the inevitable outgrowth of that. And hopefully, like with a tipping point with anything that happens in culture, it's the breaking point.
Yeah.
And it's where we realize like, oh, there is a real downside to this. And while half of the public might not see it all the time, like whatever side it's on, something happens and half of the country says, oh yeah, that's right. That's the way it should be. And the other half says, what are you talking about? This is nonsense. Somebody's going to be real pissed off and realize like, we're seeing this very differently. And so there's a movement that can happen in opposition to that and realize like the onus is on us as a culture to better understand how we're being affected by this and counter it, because otherwise it's just going to be one extreme to the next. I'm doing this, doesn't matter whether it's true or whether it's good or whether it's right. It's because it's what I feel and it's opposite of what you think and feel. And then there's an equal and opposite reaction pulling in the other direction. And there's never any balance point. I think we're starting to realize how toxic that is and how it's not a sustainable way of living within a country, in a world, in a culture. So, I've become kind of a proponent for the middle. I used to think of moderates as just, maybe being lazy or just being not willing to fight the good fight.
Cowardice.
Yeah. Like as a young man, you're idealistic and you think, well, we got to have the revolution. We got to change everything, whatever your politics are. And then I look back at myself at a younger age and I think, well, those were good ideals that I had. Those were good ideas. And it's a good thing to believe that the world should be more fair and that there should be more equality and that people should treat each other with kindness and all the things that we on the left tend to, think of as progress. But the ways that I went about it and the way that a lot of young people go about it, oftentimes we shoot ourselves in the foot because we're not thinking practically in terms of what actually gets things done, what actually makes real progress. We're thinking in terms of ideals.
Yeah.
And so where real progress happens is in the minutia of the boring interchange between opposing views.
Yeah.
And having to really get down to the facts and the data and have C-SPAN conversations about policy and things that only the wonky nerds know anything about. And the idealists speak really loudly about a perfect world, and then they have to deal with the reality of the world that's never perfect. And in that push and pull, you end up with something that's neither terrible in one direction or terrible in the other direction. Frustratingly boring and slow in terms of progress, but at least not teetering on the edge of insanity and things blowing up all the time. And so I think that's the movement for me that needs to happen. That's, if anything's going to get us out of this rut that we're in, where we end up with these extremes that you're describing and crazy things happen every week, it's going to be in the middle. It's going to be some kind of balance point.
Let's just hope that happens before we all get measles.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that was, I think, probably even unanticipated by the people appointing someone like that, is how much damage can be done very quickly.
How could that not be anticipated? It was literally the first thing they were
because they're disregarding things that are just facts, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're going to have to reckon with that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
I don't know. I went on a little of a rant there.
No, it's true. I mean, it's like you say. I mean, I often wonder if the people who make the most noise, are kind of, it's almost like WWE. It's like, the guys who are the heels and they make really loud proclamations and everybody hates them and then the cameras are off and everyone's like, fucking great job, man. And they're all friends and they share a beer. Are the loudest, most extreme voices who are, when they're on TV in congressional hearings screaming about crazy shit, when the cameras go off, do they roll up their sleeves and get down to work and say, all right, let's find some middle ground? Or is that the issue that's changed? Because we've always had radical, senators and congressmen who pontificate and have 24-hour, filibusters. But when it came down to it, there was still the opportunity to roll up your sleeves and get to work and find some common ground. And I wonder if that lack of willingness to admit ignorance or to show weakness is not allowing people to come to the table anymore. Yeah. And that's why we're coming to the head that we have come to.
And that's why the conversations we have on this show about vulnerability and about, seeing challenges or seeing, problems as challenges, not threats. These things are so important because if you're so bullheaded or so egotistical or toxically masculine that you can't admit fault ever, right. And you can't recognize like, okay, this is problematic. Maybe I need to admit that I don't have the answer for this and we need to figure it out. If you're not willing to do that, then nothing ever changes. Yeah. Right. You just get stuck in the rut of doing the same thing over and over again.
And certainly admitting anxiety, mental health issues, that's weakness too, weakness.
Vulnerability versus weakness.
Yeah.
Right?
And so hopefully we're doing our part, towards keeping that conversation.
Well, I would argue that vulnerability is strength, because we all have vulnerabilities. If you deny them, then you're just denying reality. And that's not strength.
Yeah.
If you admit them and you deal with them, that's the courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
So we need to change that, flip that on its head in our culture. And I think there's enough people having conversations like this that it gives you hope that there's a way through this. I mean, look, we're in a very interesting and weird time in history, but you look back and there have been other times in history that are equally weird and frustrating, and we have gotten through it. So I try to stay optimistic. Maybe I'm giving myself a pep talk here when I say that, but it's necessary.
Well, Let's make vulnerability sexy, right?
I'm bringing vulnerability
Bringing
back.
vulnerability back. Yeah.
All right. Well, we had a wonderful conversation with the Sklar Brothers, so let's get into that. Anything else you want to share before we do that?
Please, if this is coming up in your feed and you've never seen us before, please find us, like and subscribe. We really are trying to build the show and to get more eyes on what we're doing, what we're trying to, that message we're trying to get across. So, like I said, like and subscribe on all platforms. If you have a question for us, you can always reach us at hardertobreathepodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the platforms. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Without any further ado, here's our conversation with the Sklar Brothers right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Jason and Randy Sklar, welcome to the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Thank you. It was good to be here. It was good to be able to breathe. Yes. Nancy, thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is our pleasure. I think this is actually our first episode with bona fide, real, successful comedian.
Oh, Jesus
Wait a
Christ.
minute. That's a lot of pressure.
Cool it on the compliments.
Hang on a minute.
I think that tell me if I'm wrong, I think that there's a long history of sort of a symbiotic relationship between musicians and comedians. It goes all the way back to like Sinatra and Rickles. And in my experience, musicians, like, they want to hang out with comedians. They fancy themselves funny people. Or I think the opposite is kind of true, like comedians.
Oh, my God. Musicians want to be comedians. Comedians want to be musicians all the way. They want to be rock stars.
And everybody wants to be an athlete.
Right. Everyone wants to be an athlete, and we can't do it. But, like, the difference is that the thing that musicians can do, the general public, like, can't do. So nobody's ever going to be, most people aren't. Like, you saw the video of, like, the lead singer of, oh my God, why am I now?
Foo Fighters, Green Day?
When they brought the guy up and, like, he literally plays the beginning of the song, like they let the kid come out.
Oh yeah,
from
Billy
the crowd.
Joe does that all, and Foo Fighters does it too. Yeah.
And Foo Fighters do it all the time
It's
too.
so fun.
Dave Grohl loves to do that.
Dave Grohl, like when he had Rick Astley do whatever. That's
No, but he has regular people come up and play.
That moment is great. But most people in the crowd don't think I can walk up those two steps and go up there and do what that person is doing. Most people are just in awe. And when I go to a concert, I'm just like, oh my God, because we love music so much. And so I'm always like, this is just something I can't do. Much like when you go, we can play sports, but we just can't do what we were on the sidelines of an NFL game, and I'm just watching these guys, and they're all like 3 times the size of us and doing moves that look like high-level ballet. Certainly the wide receivers who are catching, you're just like, they're doing things that regular humans cannot do. But in comedy, there is a moment where, like, everybody in the crowd, or like a lot of people in the crowd, are like, I can do that.
Pete from Finance is hilarious.
Right?
You guys would love
I
Pete.
make lots of people laugh.
It's like modern art. When you go to the MoMA, or when you go to, like, the MoMA or some modern art museum, and you see, like, a very simple painting, and you're like, I could do that.
Right.
I could do that, but you didn't think of it. You didn't do it. And maybe you could, and maybe you couldn't. You could copy that. You could do your imitation of that, but they came up with that, and that evokes some feeling in you. And so Randy's right. Comics, when they're good, they make it seem very easy.
There's 2 steps to get up to the stage in the original room at the Comedy Store. Those 2 steps take years to be able to get up and do. So it's a little bit trickier, but the interesting flip side too is, as a musician, and you can speak to this, like, nobody wants to hear your new stuff. Nobody.
I remember we were at the Greek Theater, and we were seeing Wilco, and Jeff Tweedy was like, here's the deal. Like, he was like putting on the armor of, like, I have to, like, actually fortify myself to say this against the crowd. We're going to play the new album. It was when the Star Wars album that came out, they did. We're going to play all 10 songs in order, and then we're going to get to the old stuff. So if you want to be a dick and go out and get something to drink, go for it. But we're playing the new album. And the crowd cheered because they were so, like, unabashedly like, this is what we're going to do. But the opposite is true with comics. If you do, like, a bit or a joke that people have seen before, you'll hear about it in the line afterwards if you're selling merch.
It's kind of the same stuff we saw last year. And you're like,
are you guys working on any new material? And you're like 50 or 60% of what we did is new. And they're like, yeah, but I saw that bit about the da-da-da. And, like, because a lot of times, sometimes with comedy, you are living on the element of the misdirect
Right.
or the surprise. But for us, what's interesting, I think, is for a lot of people, because we're a team and because our bits play longer, and you saw a show that we did, which had a lot of longer bits and a longer story in it, but our stuff kind of plays like music in some ways. The bits are 2 to 3 minutes long, sometimes 4 minutes long. There's a lot of loaded jokes, so you could watch it more than one time and get something new. And so people tend to complain about that less to us, I think.
Because they'll be like, oh, you got to hear them do this.
Right. I've actually always wondered. This is a great segue because I've here comes the washing your balls a little bit. I've been a fan of you guys for 20 years, honestly, and I've always wondered about the writing that you guys do. The thing that makes you so unique as a team is the banter, the back and forth. One guy has the setup, one guy has the punchline, the next guy has the tag. Is that as scripted and choreographed as it sounds, or is it changed from night to night? If Randy introduces a bit, you get the punchline. How does that? Is it as scripted as it sounds, or is it more organic each night?
I mean, it depends where we are in the process of doing the joke. So it does function like a band in terms of one person brings the kernel of an idea into the room, into this collective. So like the great Bogdanovich documentary about Tom Petty.
Have you seen that 4-hour doc?
Oh my God, dude,
have
it's
to see it.
Bogdanovich, great shooting guard.
Yeah, Bojo. Yeah,
Bojan Bogdanovich. Bogey Bogdanovich. No, but
Peter Bogdanovich. Basically, like, got into a pissing contest like he always was with Scorsese. Scorsese does No Direction Home, which is the Dylan documentary, which is like 2.5 hours. Really unbelievable.
Bogdanovich
Fantastic.
is like, all right, I'll do a 4-hour Petty documentary. Okay. Which has some Dylan in it because of the Wilburys. Yeah. But there's a moment where Petty, they're on tour.
Which, by the way, was a little petty. If you ask me to try and do a 4-hour documentary,
It's a little petty.
on Petty,
It's
very
a little
petty.
So he's playing, he's got the riff for The Waiting, and he's in the hotel room, and like they're on tour, and there's, again, it's interesting.
Downtime.
Not at a time when you have smartphones. There probably wasn't anything on TV. So like you can be creative in that moment, and just all he's got is do and he just keeps playing it over and over. Finally, like the band is like, shut the F up. Like,
Or write the rest of that song.
And so he does. but he had that riff and he brought it to it, and then they kind of filled out the song afterwards. So like something will happen to us and we're like, oh, this has got to be something. What's your opinion on this, and how do we feel about this, and what's the larger issue at hand here, and then how can I fill in? And okay, it's your story about, this is like a new concept of, and this happens to me too, and we think it's really funny about how difficult it is to be a parent right now because social media is just something that most parents didn't have to deal with. And social media in this moment for teenagers and preteens, it has grown up with those kids. And so you're at a moment where like even teenagers 10 years ago, they just weren't dealing with it. There wasn't it wasn't as much a big part of it. So
Like I've never thought in my life I would have to say to my son as we're watching a basketball game together of a team that we both like, get off your phone. The game's going on. Like I have to be like, during commercials, fine. But like the fact that I have to set rules with the phone about, so we're like,
we had the social media talk like with our kids. Like he had it with his kids.
so I'm like, I had to have this. So the bit that we wrote was I had to have the social media talk with my kids, and you guys know the talk. I sat him down like last week and I said, look, man, yesterday I sent you 2 TikToks that I thought you would think are funny.
You didn't even
You didn't open one of them.
Didn't even
What
respond.
the hell, man?
Yeah,
like, why are you treating me like some
you don't
stranger?
like? Yeah. Your mom sent you 3 and you left her undelivered. The woman who delivered you.
Are you kidding me? Go upstairs and write an essay. We don't even have an upstairs in our house. I'm like, go upstairs,
build an upstairs,
and go on the roof and write an essay about why you think I would think that you would think that's funny. And it's that moment of like, now
you reveal.
social media has given us a whole new realm for your children to reject you. Like, and it's hilarious because that is my love language with people, my friends now. I see a TikTok about golf that's funny, I send it to my golf friend. I see a TikTok about soccer that's funny, I send it to my friend who loves soccer. I see a TikTok about music that's funny or a cat doing some dumb thing, I get it on Randy and Chain with a friend.
We have so many chains where the thing fits and you send it and it's like, I love you. I was thinking
I thought
it's
of you.
curated for each
I saw
individual
this
friend,
and thought of you. It made me laugh, and I want to make
this to you because, and it really, you're saying I'm thinking of you
in the 70s and the 80s. You'd have someone over to your house and be like, "Don't move. I just got this record and I thought of you." And you put on a record and you go, "Bro, this song, this guitar riff, I thought of you."
Or you call someone up. You reach out and touch someone.
I was reading this book. I was reading Clan of the Cave Bear. Or whatever
Bonfire of the Vandals.
Right? I read
Have you
some book.
everything you've ever wanted to know about sex but afraid to ask.
Ask, and I thought of you. So that vibe and understanding, commenting on that moment and dealing with that with your kids, that's something that happened to me. I did send 2 TikToks.
So he said that he sent 2 TikToks. I'm like, I do it all the time, and my 17-year-old daughter never responds. I'm like, do you get any of these? And then suddenly I'm like, my wife, who says to me all the time, like when I don't know what's going on, like what is this thing happening? She'd be like, do you get the emails? Which is
most
like the
passive
worst
aggressive
thing that anybody can say to anybody. I'm sorry, is your email broken? Do you get the emails? And I'm like, yeah, I get the emails. Okay, I read the subject.
I just don't open them.
I don't open them. All right, but like, it's suddenly I become that for my kid. And again, like Jay said, it puts you in a position to not be fun, and which is kind of funny. Like it's just this fun little thing that now is like a
because I think as people, we're trying to stay cooler, longer, younger, longer. We talk about this in our 2-man show, which is that our parents never were trying to be cool. That was never an objective for them.
That's why, like, people in their back in the day, you look at people, you like, I saw like a thing of the cast of Cheers, and like Cliff Clavin on Cheers was like 38 years old. I'm like, dude, that's
a rough 38.
That's 15 years younger than we
Well,
are.
there's
right
the
now.
amazing picture from Cocoon where Wilford Brimley is the same age as Tom Cruise.
Right.
And they show them both at like 51, 50. I mean, we're
We're
older than-
53. We're over the Wilford Brimley and Cocoon. For God's sakes. I mean, it's crazy to
It's
think
crazy
about
to
that.
think, right?
So,
but part of that is because we care about looking young and care about that. That was not a care to our parents. They didn't
we
care.
don't care about being cool.
No one was trying to save their hair.
So
no one was trying to do that
all
shit.
that stuff is interesting, and it all sprouted from this moment where he was like, I sent these TikToks to my kid and he doesn't even respond to me, and I feel slighted. And we're like, okay, that's the kernel. That's the
That's the riff.
What is it? Now what's the song around it? What's the bit around it? Okay, and so all these things are starting to come up. And we're like, okay, let's put all this stuff in there. Let's put it on stage and let's see where we can go. Where's it getting laughs? And a lot of times we'll put too much in, and it's just not. Like the concept is there too much, and then like over time and putting it up and performing, you start to be like,
Oh yeah, you
we
pull
don't
this
need
out,
this.
then you go down a different direction.
We don't need this. We don't need that. Let's just keep it. This is what it is, and this is the jokes, and let's just put it in and let's see what happens. Like, you know, and that's how we build our stuff. And then once you kind of do it enough, we kind of know where each of us fall. Of course, if it's a story about him, then he's going to drive it and I'll be commenting on it. If it's a story about him that then goes to a larger concept, then we figure out how we each participate in this.
If it's something that comes from me and then turns into an act out, then there's room to riff within the characters that we create.
Once you set the scene of what the act out is going
Anybody
to be,
can play anybody
Yeah,
in the
well,
scene.
you
Or we know, or we assign ourselves the characters.
Your throat sounds great, by the way.
Sorry,
Jesus
terrible,
Christ.
horrible, great
Terrible
podcast.
for podcasting.
We're gonna keep that in.
Cut
Oh
that.
my God! I apologize. I was 2 minutes late, but he's ruining this podcast. With
No,
his throat.
when we stay within the characters that we choose, but we set up the scenarios and then we leave room to improvise within it because we know that can be funny. And we also allow for us to, in the moment, come up with something, hopefully.
Because that is when you're having fun and when the audience is laughing. That's when the greatest.
Well, that's when I think something happens in your brain that actors, we don't get to do as much. When you're acting in a scene, you obviously can't change the lines. If you're in a play or if you're in a movie, if you're lucky, you know, the director will give you some
If you're in
license.
a play, it's a little different because play is almost like multicam sitcom acting. Because so we just did Night Court, which the reboot of Night Court, which just aired 2 nights ago, and we did it a while ago and then it just aired. But there's an art to doing that, which is very much like doing live theater, which is that you say something and if it gets a laugh, in life, if we were to say something that's kind of funny, maybe the person would laugh a little bit, but you're on to the next thing. But you have to allow for the laugh. There's laughter, maybe into an applause break, depending on how funny the writers write the stuff that you did. And so then you as an actor have to fill that time. You can't just walk and start going into your next line. You have to fill that time with business that is truthful and relevant in that moment.
The Kramer corollary where he's got to kill 15 seconds while the applause goes. Yeah.
Right.
And you just can't just stand there and just wait or turn out to the crowd. Like one of the funniest moments in, was it Extras? Extras was when Chris Martin from Coldplay comes on to the sitcom.
Do you remember this?
Yeah, when the whistle blows. Yeah.
When the whistle blows, comes on the sitcom, the whistle blows, and it's like,
and they get an applause break.
And he turns to the audience that's out there and he's just kind of
waves.
You can't do that.
What do you just broke the fourth wall?
I mean, you're breaking the fourth wall if you do that. But if you're believing that you're in the scene and whatnot, there has to be a business, and that business can change every time. It can be different for you as it comes up, whatever happens.
But in stand-up, if you're getting big laughs, something happens in your brain and you're like, I feel like the synapses start firing. And if you're really in that moment, you can say some really great things and you can build the bit. And that's how our bits grow a lot of times. We bring them to the stage at about 70%. Or 60,
sometimes less at the very beginning, but then once we start to figure it out, we're like, okay, maybe we can do more. Maybe we can do more about this, and maybe we can add to. Sometimes a bit is not done. You think it's done, and then like you go on the road, and someone's like, "Have you ever?" Because we tag people's stuff all the time, and people will be like, "Have you guys ever?" It's so funny that this thing that you're doing reminds me of this, and we're like, "Oh my God, that's right." We start to add that in, and I remember we did a bit last night, and a friend of ours was like, man, there's so much new in the 15-minute set that you did at the Laugh Factory last night. And he's like, and this thing that I saw a while ago is now so much longer and you've added so much to it. And we're like, that's what doing it on the road 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
To extend the music metaphor, it sounds almost more like a jam band about jazz where it's constantly evolving. You never play the same song the same way.
So I love that. That's such a great point. And a friend of ours just went and saw Fish for the first time. He's like, I can't believe Matt Price, for the first time, as an improviser. He was a phenomenal improviser through all the years. He's a comedy writer now. Great performer, but great improviser. He's like, I can't believe I, for some reason, put up some block and was like, I'm not going to. He said the reason why I think he said was because he saw the Grateful Dead late in their career and was kind of like, was underwhelmed and kind of lumped them together when in essence Fish similar in vibe but very different in technique and style.
And still I would argue Trey had a very public reckoning with drugs and whatnot,
but it didn't like ruin his life. Like Jerry slowed down so much because of it, but either way what he was blown away by was how they improvised and they played with each other, and there was such a sense of play with the crowd and with the balloons popping around and everyone having fun, and there was real joy. And so as soon as he said I'm into it, I sent him the this song from 1990 from Fish in Fort Collins. They did a version of the song Harry Hood, which if you know that song, you know the band. This was one of the earliest versions of the song. And as comedians, what happens sometimes is you're developing a song, and then it gets to the sweetest spot of especially when you're improvising within the song. And I highly recommend people find this on YouTube and listen to this version. Fort Collins, 1990, Harry Hood. Because there's the build in the second half of the song is literally, I think it's perfect. I think later they improvised off of that, and I think they did too much. They put too many hats on hats.
They live on trying to build the tension, and then release.
But later, even in the release, they sort of messed around, and you could feel like they wanted to keep developing and changing. I'm like, no, you found the right spot with this version of this song in this moment. I sent it to him.
So you got to know when to shut that down.
You got to know when to shut it down.
Leave it when it is.
Or prove imperfection.
That's
right. Or you say this is as good as it's going to be. Anything we add to it would probably be a lateral move at this point. We don't need to keep adding here. And for us, we're we need to keep coming up with new stuff. And that's always such a hard thing for comics. I don't know about musicians and as you're a writer, it's so hard for a creative person to be all right, we got to write a new song today. No, what? You're not going into the coal mine to dig out. Like, you're like, it has to come to you. The inspiration, the germ, the idea. You have to live your life. Some weird experience has to happen. Something has to happen for it to then make its way into your brain, to the creative part of your brain, to be like that. So forcing it is just, I don't know how that's possible.
And you guys are so unique in that, I think of the comics that I grew up loving, and I listened to the Steve Martin albums and Eddie Murphy tapes and things when I was a kid. As much as we know about those comics, they still were sort of, they were a persona. You guys inject so much of your actual identity, which is a word I want to get back to, into your act, whether it's St. Louis, whether it's Judaism, whether it's family, whether it's sports. I mean, that's another thing. You guys have such a deep well to draw from, and you're not afraid to have that as your on-stage persona, as opposed to like, well, this is us in our family life, this is us on our stage. There's a very blurred line. Your show that we've alluded to a few times is your show called The Born Identity.
BORN. We took the pun back. We undid.
You want to set it up a little bit? Talk about what the show.
Yeah, simply, this is the best description that was given to it by the director, Evan Shapiro, who's developed it with us, who we love, love, love. He said just two twins who may have been switched when we were younger, when we were babies, spent our entire life trying to figure out if we are who we are. And at various points along the way, when we find out about it and beyond, it gets kicked down the road to the point where we can't find out anymore. And then when we're almost 50, we do find a way to find out. And what that finding out at that point in our life, after becoming parents ourselves and losing our father, who we love so much, and our mom going through health issues, what the understanding of why it got kicked down the road and who we are as people and our decision to become parents really defining us in ways that we could have never, ever expected, because you sort of think you're going to go into being a parent and you're just going to sort of lose yourself and just be another mom or another dad, when in fact you found out exactly who you are. That whole thing that comes to a point in this play that is really interesting and powerful, and we sort of realize, does it matter? I don't know. You gotta watch the play to sort of figure out, does finding out exactly who we were from the beginning really matter? And what is identity, and what does it mean, and what makes up who we are?
And what happens when you see your parents as people instead of parents, just your parents, when you start to look at their entire story? Because we know our parents from when we became conscious people. They were always our parents. But who were they before they were our parents? And who were their parents? And what were the decisions they made as young parents and as people the same age as we are? Like, what were the choices they made in order to make it possible for your parents to be here, in order to make it possible for you to be here, in order to make it possible for your children to be here,
in order to make it possible for the audience to be sitting there?
So all those questions, if you draw lines through your past, help you understand what it is that makes us who we are. And that's what the show's about. Mixed in with all that is a ton of comedy about what it means to be parents, how hard it is to be a parent right now in this moment, and how the world is understanding now that like you can opt out of that choice. You can just be like, yeah, I don't have to get married like we all thought we had to get married back in the day. B, I do not have to have children. It's expensive. It's hard. It's dangerous.
They don't answer your ticket.
Yeah, you ever try and take an iPad away from a 6-year-old, they will cut a bitch.
They will cut a bitch.
So you got to be...
So that's the thing. It's like people are choosing not to do it, and the population of the world is getting smaller, and it's causing problems around the world. And that decision, while totally valid and totally makes sense, had everyone in our lineage and past made that decision, we wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be sitting having this podcast right now. We would. So when you start to understand, it's almost like, there's some mindfulness stuff. It touches on mindfulness. I don't know how deeply you guys go into that world, but there's a mindfulness practice of like when you eat a grape, and it's a famous mindfulness sort of tactic, is to take an individual grape. When you eat a grape, most people shove a bunch of grapes in their mouths and they're like, I'm eating. But if you take one individual grape and you think of the journey that grape went on, like who planted the seeds to the grape, where'd the grape grow, who picked the grapes, how the grapes go from there to there.
The grape, that was your plural for grapes?
The grapes.
Look at all the grape.
Where the grape grow.
It's like Cheez-It. That's the pearl of Cheez-It. Anyway, the grape itself, the one grape that you're eating, if you look at a grape and you say, what is this grape's journey?
Where the gray grape grow.
Right? Where does grape come from? All this grape is so good. So you then, when you're eating it, it supposedly in that moment, you appreciate it more. It tastes different. It tastes better. You like all the things. You start to like understand it a little bit more. We can do that same thing with ourselves and our parents and our lives and our past. And all those things start to, you start to understand some of the really cool sacrifices that people made in order to get you here. And then you start to forgive your parents for making mistakes and understand that, once you become a parent, you don't know everything. You do make mistakes that you regret. And I know that now as a parent.
The good news is your kids are going to let you know that you made those mistakes.
they cash in.
Never miss an opportunity to tell
Well, and you've been doing that to your parents. So then, if our mom made a mistake early on and we got mixed up and then they covered it up and tried to pretend like it didn't happen and just guessed, and then we spent a lifetime trying to figure out, we could sit there and harbor resentment for them for that choice and for us living this sort of like unknown weird thing in our lives and having this identity crisis forever until we found out or until we had a chance to find out. Or we could be like, hey, you know what? They were in their 20s and had kids. When we were in our 20s, we lost our wallets twice in a month-long period.
And we had wallet chains.
We had wallet chains.
Like, how do we do that?
So how do we take a moment and through our own lens of life, understand these people as the same people we are just 30 years ago?
And so specifically as twins, I mean, it's a battle that I would imagine most twins go through is their own separate identity.
Totally.
So was that something that's always been, I mean, you guys obviously chose to work together and go into this career together, but you still, you and I talked when we first were meeting about how sometimes it pisses you off when people are like, hey, Rand or Jay, I don't know who you are.
Right.
How insulting that is to you guys as individuals.
So it's not insulting if it's a new person who's like trying.
Who's trying.
And you're kind of like, oh, you're trying. I understand that because we have friends that are twins and I have some friends that are twins that at the beginning, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know there's a difference between you two, but I don't know.
Have the foothold on the.
I don't know who is what, and I don't understand you. It's like, for me, it's like almost wrapping your head around a script or something. Like, how do I understand that you are who you are to just understand? So, but if someone's like known us for a long period of time and they just don't care to like want to do, we're like, oh, well, that's.
You're saying
You're making
to us,
the choice that you just don't care to do. And so then it feels a little like you don't care. And it's hard not to take that way. And maybe even to give those people grace, like maybe doesn't even cross their mind. Maybe they're just like, I have too much in my life. I can't now sit around and try and think what makes Jason.
Well, it's pretty easy. Like one of us has a mustache and the other one has glasses. Like you could be the
one
most
of you is funny. One of you isn't.
One of us funny. Yeah, one of us is what do we say in the act? That Randy hates cilantro.
That's
and
true.
I'm a good comedian.
You know what?
You understand the differences.
F you.
Identity is such a journey that's so challenging for everyone, and at every stage of our life, we're like trying to figure out who we are, separate from our parents, separate from the culture that we came from. Are we part of that culture, and how are we individual and separate from that in our own way?
Yeah.
I imagine as twins, that journey is a little different than anyone else who's not a twin. Did you have like a moment in time, as we do with our parents as teenagers, where you rebelled against everything that you're supposed to be? Did we have it out with each other at any phase of your life, or was it always?
So, I got to give our parents credit. They raised us in a way to be like, you guys need to rely on each other, but not be dependent on each other. It's such a thin line of like, don't be codependent to where it's just the two of you. Like there's the video that just came up this past week, and we did a little thing about it of those twins in Australia who like went viral talking about like our mom was carjacked and she went into a bush and oh my God. Just watching
But it was a
that.
bit. It had to have been a bit, right? Like they made the choice.
I mean, I guess the thing that was most surprising is that they were wearing the same shirt. So didn't expect that. Didn't see that one coming. But they work at like, they're vet techs who like help save birds that are in trouble. Like they're good people, I think. I think people in Australia are a little annoyed by them. There's like an annoyance backlash to that because they are just, and so we don't want to be seen or grouped into that. And we chose this career in comedy, and we chose to go down a path where people would initially be like, you guys are a gimmick. Mm-hmm. and then we have to like prove our way out of it.
You're
That,
you're a prop comic with your brother.
Totally.
Your brother is your prop.
That's so funny you say that, but you're right.
Yeah.
That really is it. We're taking it's a very bizarre tack that we've chosen, which is to take the one thing that does make us unique and special and not focus on that in our stand-up. But this show that we did that you came and saw really does deal with it in a very centralized way. But I don't think in a way that is very surface and like we've seen other twin comedians like kind of try to play off some of that stuff, and it feels very surface and basic and not very truthful. But yes, we have had moments where I think as twins, I think there are like two directions that twins can go. One, they're like, we're going to individuate so far away from each other that no one's going to be able to tell that we are twins. I'm talking about identical twins, because fraternal twins, it's not as big of a burden, but like you see those identical twins where one has crazy blue hair and the other one shaves her head and he looks like this and then he looks like this, and he worked out so much that it's like very clear that no one's ever going to mistake them for each other ever again. And they move to different cities and they do very different things, and they, one is married, one is gay, one is straight, one is whatever. I don't know that that's a choice.
That being gay is a choice.
Not that it's a choice.
Let's be honest. You choose to be.
Not that it's a choice, but no, you know what I'm saying. One is like people are really engaging in the most disparate behaviors possible to really push away from being twins. The other version is like those twins from Australia, twins who really are like merging into one human.
Or this is our identity. This is how people know us. They know us as this unit, and like
they clearly bought those outfits with the intention of
to wear them at the same time,
or having people notice them as being the same. And there's value in that a little bit. It's really hard in this world to break through or be memorable or, catch someone's eye. And we understand that. Everyone wants some relevance in this life. And being twins is unique. It's less unique now than it used to be. When we were born, it was 1 in 30 or 1
in 80 or something like that.
I think, it was 1 in 80 and now it's 1 in 30 with fertility drugs. So that's one direction to go. The direction that much fewer twins go in, and when we meet some twins that are like this, we instantly love them and feel connected to them, which is to say, yes, we are twins. Yes, we have some similarities. Yes, we are not going to shy away from those similarities in moments where we talk at the same time, where we share the same vibe and the same feeling about something. And then we are also subtly different. We are different people. We have different experiences. We have different home lives, we have different wives, we have different children that have shaped us.
But how do we use the fact that we look alike, look similar, to our advantage in a way that's interesting? Like, meaning I can turn to him and, make a joke. You look like you teach jazz at a community college. Fine. I mean, but like what people understand and realize if we go into each other on stage and whatnot, or in certain moments, is that it's okay. We're not going to not be brothers anymore. We're not going to be like, it's anybody who has a brother or a sister where you have that relationship, they immediately understand that on a deep level.
And there's something really funny about two twins making fun of how they look, of appearance. To roast each other on appearance is a very funny,
it twists the roast even like a quarter turn, that we're doing our version of that thing. But it's like, yeah, we can go on.
But what it says to the audience is we see ourselves as two very different people. We see ourselves as very different, even though you may not. We see ourselves as different people. And I think that's valuable and important and a smarter way to address it. So, I don't know that we had this very definitive rebellion against each other or the concept of being twins. I think
we just didn't like the hacky stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you guys should switch on girls, which were like, you mean perpetrate a rape?
Probably not.
No.
Probably not going to do that.
Thanks. Or you guys should, whatever. You guys should switch classes or whatever. We were like, why? I don't even want to be in my class, let alone take a test in his class that I don't know. Like, come on. So we always sort of thought, all right, well, that feels like it's been done before. I can't believe we had a meter for what is hack versus what should be original even back then. It just bothered us that no, don't lump us into that. Don't do that. So we kind of rebelled against, if we rebelled against anything, the sort of conventional ideas of things to do for being twins, dressing exactly alike, We never really loved it. We just didn't do it. Our mom did it a couple times when we were really little, but she didn't even like to do that. Maybe she had us in like similar styles, but different colors. And what I would say is we've now grown to the point where like, no, we need to have our own. Like I get very upset. Like Jay has this shirt. Okay. And if like we showed up here today, because I don't know, I didn't ask him, what did you wear today?
Oh my God.
Like, I don't know what would have happened. Like he would have been like, can I borrow a shirt?
Ryan
Like, can I borrow a shirt? Like, I can't be wearing this thing because it just bothers us to no end, because we're not the Australian twins whose mom got carjacked and ran into a bush.
I'm curious about this idea of identity for the two of you together and separate, how that works in terms of the work that you do together and on stage versus your private lives. I know that, like, for me, an occupational hazard that I have is that my persona as a therapist now is I'm in the room with people, just talking about really heavy stuff. Oh yeah, sure. And I have a fun, silly side that I feel like is kind of diminishing. And I was just at a wedding this last weekend, and I like found myself like every conversation within 3 minutes, I was like, oh, and that must have been really hard when
you're in the deep end right away. You're like, whoa.
Well, but because you've trained the muscle of what buttons to push to allow people to go deeper into the hard stuff. And
Which probably made everybody who you talk to feel like,
so heard.
Oh my God. I had the best
Ryan was
conversation
so
with Ryan.
in touch with what I was talking
Ryan's like, I'm drained emotionally.
Well, I watched my wife, who's a therapist, you guys had on your show, who very much you become a vessel. You carry a lot of people's hard stuff, and it can weigh you down. So you have to probably consciously be like, I need to turn it off. I need to be silly. I need to be fun.
Yeah. So how does that work in the reverse? Is that a occupational hazard for comedians and for the persona that you guys have together? When you're separate from each other, is it hard to step out of that, or is that who you are all the time? Or
I think it's at the core of who we are. And again, because our whole thing doesn't just rely on being twins. Like, we're just like, we need to be funny in a way where those people who are individual comics up there and say these guys are funny, the fact that they're twins makes it unique, something we haven't seen. I just love you want to come off stage and have your friends. Our friend Dulce Sloan, who's a great comedian, Daily Show, she showed up last night at the Laugh Factory. I'm like, when are you going up? She's like, I'm not. I'm just came to see you and Tiffany Haddish and Chris Spencer. I just want to see my friends. I'm like, oh my God, I love you. You're the nicest. And we got off stage, and she was like, y'all are so stupid. You guys are stupid. And just then told like 3 of the jokes we did. And I was like,
Jeff Ross stayed after his set to watch our set.
Like, I love those things. And we're not just saying that just to give ourselves compliments, but that's what we're going for, is them saying, not you guys are great up there together. No, there's talking specific material that we've written and done, that this came from us and we did our own spin on it, and that's it. But they find it funny.
But I think I use humor to relate to my kids all the time by myself.
Right. So I'm saying that. So the strengthening of that, so that it's not just relying on both of us being in the room, means that we then go into our own individual lives and
put
take
it in the context of a band. Like, part of the reason why the Beatles were so great is because each one of them could have had their own band, and they kind of did eventually. But like, when they came together, it's like a super group. So we say to ourselves, how can we both be most valuable players within this unit and this partnership? Because then you come back in your life, and if you really work hard to understand what makes you funny, and you can, incorporate that in your life, you connect with your kids in a different way. Like, I remember with my daughter, we were playing this game where we were just driving somewhere, and like, every new song that she would put up on the iTunes, what would come up on my car, she would be like, let's make a joke about that, of the album. Dad, make a joke about that album. And I just look at it quickly, and I was like, Tears for Fears, the original Tears for Fears.
Song from the big chair.
Yeah, the two shot of the two of them. And very quickly I was like, guys, I got good news, bad news. Bad news is our barber retired. Good news is the guy who cuts our dog's hair is here. Okay, so I just made that joke off the top of the dome. She loved it so much that now that's like an inside joke for us. We have so many inside jokes, and she's 11, and I have tons of jokes with my son, even though he doesn't read my TikToks that I send him. But like, we have so many. And I said, read my TikToks. That shows you how old I am. But it's
Read
like
them.
that language between us and within our lives, with our wives and our family, just making jokes to me and us being funny. That's a part of us in our core.
Oh my God. I found this TikTok as like a moment, and this just it made me laugh so hard. I don't know why I'm like so into it, is like just people saying to their dogs, I love you, and the dogs saying it back to them. Have you seen that? It's crazy.
It's kind of, some are super close and some aren't
like
so
the
close.
big dogs that are like huskies and whatnot, they really are like, "Rah, rah, rah." It's so funny.
Or how about when the dog sings and the person can play the piano and
shit.
accompany it?
That
It's
stuff
great.
is so fun. So, but this particular one is so I sent it to my wife and I sent it to our kids because we have like 2 French bulldogs. Now I am trying. This is the funnier thing, is that I'm trying to get my dogs to do it, and there's no human way. Like it almost feels like trying to be successful in the entertainment industry. I'm like, there's no way.
It's either going to happen or it's not.
Right.
But it has
I'm
nothing to
like-
do with what you
Or it would have happened by now.
What exactly? What happened? I swear to God, if one of them says I love you back to me, I may quit like doing everything I do, and that just is the only thing I do, is like saying that I have the power to make your dog say I love you. It's so funny, and my obsession with it, and just that's the way my wife and I now say I love you to each other, is like as dogs. It is so dumb, and it is so she'll be in a business meeting, and as I'm saying, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna run to the store. I gotta go pick up, like, what do you want me to get? I gotta pick up some wine for you at TJ's. I gotta go do this. I gotta do that. I'm gonna go do this, and then I gotta go drop this thing off at the post office. Where do you want me to put this other thing? Okay, I'll talk to you later. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. And like, we don't even say anything about it. It's just, that's what it is. And so I just love that is a part of, and that has nothing to do with me and him. It just has to do with the way we are in our lives. And I try to be, my oldest daughter is really funny. She's at the University of Michigan. She's doing improv. She's, doing sketch comedy, and she's writing like funny movies and stuff. And wants to be a director. She's in the film program there. And she's
very funny.
Very funny. She's very much like if she was around when we were kids, we would have all been like best friends.
Buddies.
She's wonderful. My younger daughter's funny in a different way. She's like more of a 17-year-old girl who's like very much a product of the time right now. The older one's timeless. She's very much of the moment type kid. But we have humor in both of us. Like, I have different senses of humor with each of them.
Totally. Different kids, bring out different parts of you.
But it's a big part of who we are. Like, that would be and it's funny because the younger one, who I don't think, the older one is like, everybody knows her as like, this kid is really funny. Yeah. She's really, that's the way people identify. The younger one, people are like, she's really funny. And it's like not what she wants to go into. I don't know. She's like, I might be a therapist. I might be an interior designer like my mom. But so like no desire to go the route of what the older one is. But people are just like, that's the way they identify. So it's very much a huge.
That's the only gene we can give our kids. Like LeBron could make his kid pretty good at basketball. No, great, like truly great. But NBA is like insane. That's what we say about our kids, is that
we love them so much that they'll never be generational sports talents. We're like,
you gotta like give your kids some childhood trauma if you want them to be great. You gotta be the person they prove wrong if you want them to truly.
That's got the only motivation that can really.
That's the deepest like sports motivation. We're never gonna do that. We're never gonna.
And we're like, if you don't believe us, like LeBron's dad, not around. LeBron around a lot for Bronny.
Or at least like loving to his
kid,
still there,
which is an awesome compliment to him. But it just means that he's not gonna.
That's
he's
a G League
guy,
love,
right? Like, you look down at the end of like any NBA bench, you're like, all right, that guy, the 12th guy, he's averaging 2 points a game, but he averaged like 3 hugs a day from his parents. I'm like, he's never gonna get in. But that's what love looks like, garbage time in an NBA game.
Brian Scalabrine, loved by his parents.
Loved.
You both mentioned your wives. Of course, we did have your wife, Dr. Jessica Zucker, on the show recently, which had a great episode. New book. Very impressive woman, very intelligent, very accomplished. I wondered, do you wear the glasses just so you look a little Barnes?
I have to. No, she's so smart.
His eyesight's terrible. Mine is getting worse, and he's like, you can't wear glasses.
That's my thing. That is my thing.
So now I can't wear glasses. So I just have deteriorating eyesight. Is that what I have to do?
Yes,
It's like,
basically.
I'm the LASIK brother.
I got a Mr. Magoo my way. Are you really LASIK?
No, but I'm saying that'll
might
be
have
your
to be.
I might have.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like that helps shape your life and your experience. A lot of who you are is shaped through your partner, right? And so,
I mean, Jay, you're always saying she's constantly pathologizing you.
yes, she is, and I'm not even one of her patients. So, no, but there is like a sort of like it that informs how your life is around who your partner is and what they're into. And so, that's had an effect on me and my identity and who I am in a big way.
Is it an opposites attract kind of thing? Like you're the funny one and she's the serious one?
She can be funny. She definitely can be funny. I wouldn't say she's goofy funny, but I'd say she 100% can be funny. When I get her to laugh, like with a good one, then I'm like, that's solid.
She was certainly funny when she was bitching about you not responding to texts. She was like, he never responds. So
I never respond. I'm so bad. And she's like, how are you always on your phone and never respond to texts? And I'm like, I don't know. I miss all the texts, but I am on the phone a lot.
Well, we're in a unique position to ask you a question that we asked your wife, and the same applies to you, Rand. Do you guys, as comics who are constantly on the road, constantly out of town, does that weigh on you guys as parents, as husbands? And how do you handle that?
So we can tell a
Super hard.
story. It's hard. It's very, very hard. Finding the balance between
So
those
we
two.
try to not be on the road all the time. But it's like the scene in Annie Hall where,
If you ask us how often we're on the road,
we're
at
like,
most
we're
6
like,
days
not that
a month.
much, like 6 days of what, like maybe
7
to 8 days a month, maybe. Okay, that's the most. And then working in town and whatnot.
It's like in Annie Hall when her
how much-
therapist says, "How often are you having sex?"
She's like, all the time, like 3 days a week.
3 times a week.
3 times a week. And then his therapist is like, how often are you having sex? He's like,
Hardly ever.
3
3 times a week.
So the way people view it
So
is,
we ask our family. They're like, "They're never here. They live in a suitcase. They're gone 6 days a month." Which I get it. It's so hard when you're out of town and you're gone and you miss important things, and it sucks. It totally sucks. And we had a guy on our podcast years ago, a really great comic who,
oh my God, I love him.
He's such a good comic, and he was a big time comic that we followed when we were younger.
Had a TV show in the 90s, had like a network TV show that ran for like a half a season, whatever. It was big. I mean, big to get, and had development deals and whatnot. And
Bought a house, and then all of a sudden was like behind on like, so how do you do it? You go on the road and you stand up. And so he was doing like the 40 week a year stint.
We don't do
Stand
that.
up.
I mean,
We
we
don't
do
do
like maybe 15 to 20 weekends out of the year. We don't really do it in the summer because it's just not great in the summer. We try and find places we can go that's the weather's not great so that people will still come out, because just for some reason you got to go like to Phoenix in the summer where people are like, I got to get inside. I can't be out. So, but we're just not on the road the way we are kind of in the fall and in the spring. But we try not to do it somewhere. This guy was on the road all the time, and he's like staying at this hotel this is on our podcast years ago, probably like 15 years, maybe like 13 years ago, he told this story, and it stayed with us the entire time. And he's on the road. He's like staying at this hotel on the side of the highway, and there's a Ruby Tuesdays and a Fuddruckers and a gas station. It's like, that layout on the exit ramp, and you just know exactly what he's looking out at. It's raining. He just goes at the window and he just
On a Saturday morning.
he just starts crying, and he's like, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm just start to like literally like my emotions just get the best of me. And then he realized it was his daughter's birthday, and we're like, oh my God, are you kidding
Heartbreaking.
me? That like you didn't know that beforehand, but that you
Like,
just been
how
on
did
the
she
road
take
so
it that
much.
you were gone? And he's like,
She
terrible.
was not terrible. She was not happy, and he was like,
And we said, then we were like trying to like
so
save
what's
it.
your relationship now with your daughter? And he's like, I don't talk to her. And we're like, oh my God, we can't. So it is very important that we try to be at certainly the most important things that we can with our, sometimes we can't, like sometimes you just gotta go where the work is. I missed Thanksgiving a couple years ago because I was up in Toronto shooting What We Do in the Shadows. We both did, but he was able to come home. I had a little bit more to shoot, but I was there for an entire month, and it sucks that I missed Thanksgiving, but that was a really important job for us, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, you're gonna miss a few of these from time to time. It's okay. The world is not gonna come to an end. It's okay. And I sucks that I missed it. I love that holiday. I love being around
I
family.
missed my first birthday, my son's birthday this year, working. And it was the first time where I was like, he understood, but
Yeah. I mean, it just was hard. So
How
we
old is
try
your son? 11. Okay, so he's old enough to know and think about it. And yeah, and then your kids have a sense sometimes of building up resentment towards your work. Second, the suitcase comes out of the closet. You have to go. Where are you going? You know, it's hard. And you don't want them to look at your job as a negative. So I tell them, you know, I don't want to be gone. I really don't want to be gone. My hope for you is that someday you do something that you love so much that you know, even when you have to go away, you love it. So like, I'm like, I love the work, but I hate being gone from you. And, you know, for us, we've been in this business, we're 53. So like, we've been doing this for 31 years, really, like, or really like probably like 28 years of professional, getting paid 100%. This is our job, supporting ourselves with comedy without having one massive hit, with a bunch of things working sort of consistently through all these years, but without being like regulars on The Office or having a 12-year sitcom, which then propels you into the next 5 projects. Like the people who work for 30, 40 years in this business either work all the time as like unbelievable character actors or part of big casts of shows. We had our own show on ESPN for 4 years, 77 episodes. So great. Fun. We've had a bunch of other shows. We had a show on the History Channel. We've had a bunch of opportunities, but like we haven't had a massive hit. Part of that is hard on us because we have to keep rubbing sticks together and hustling as if like we've never worked before in our lives. But the flip side of that is Randy's been around to raise both of his kids from start to
finish. Yeah, that's what, again, we were joking about the NBA thing, but like the truth of it is like when you aren't, success looks like you're in Miami shooting like a TV show for 6 months and you really miss like the entire sophomore year of your daughter's high school, which has happened to friends of ours, and it's just devastating and difficult and really tough. Now, would we take that job? Of course we would.
Of course you would.
You'd
find a way to make it work.
So I wish there are like jobs that have come up that are like, for some reason or another, we got close to, didn't get, or whatever. And what could that have meant? And what would that have done? So, but the end result is I've been around for my kids, all of their stuff. And actually recently we had this thing where my youngest daughter she hadn't even been asked to senior prom. She knew she was going to be asked to it. She didn't go to the junior prom. It's just a different world. Okay. Not that but she's like, it's her senior prom. And it just so happened, she told me so late when it was, that we had a show in just north of Seattle that night. So here I am trying to figure out.
We'd sold tickets.
We'd sold tickets for it in May. So here I am trying to figure out what is the latest possible flight I could go on, because obviously I'm not going to your prom with you, but I want to see you like all dressed and I want to take pictures. I want to be there. This is the only time you're going to do it. And I felt bad for missing that. I was like, I can't believe it. So I'm like, okay, I can leave from Burbank at 5:20, which means I could, if I'm just going with carry-on luggage, then I'm just like, I can get there at like 5 to 5 or 10 to 5.
10 to 8.
And then I got to get there and drive up an hour and 15 minutes. I'm like trying to game this thing out. We're trying to figure it out. And ultimately I was like, if there's any way to move it, I know this is going to be a pain in the ass and I know this is going to be hard. So like we moved it to June. So it's now going to be in June. So now I'm there and I'm able to be there. Of course, the weekend that we moved it to June, so like we moved to June, is now like an issue for him, like taking his son to this like summer program at Penn in Philadelphia. So like on the day that we come back, like is there a chance he could fly? That we don't know what it's going to be. We just don't know yet. But like it opened the door for us to get 2 other shows in Portland and another place. But still, it was very important. I was like, I can't miss this. I just can't miss this. So
now I have to miss. No, I'm just.
but it's your senior prom is like a big deal. We just want to be there. So we have made it clear to our family that we place a high premium on being there for them as best as we can, because this business dictates to us. Unfortunately, we're not at the place where we can say like, we carve this out. So we have to just.
You guys move your show because my daughter's going to prom, and 500 people will change their schedule for you.
Well, right. They did. They moved it. So I mean, yes, every once in a while we can do that. But if like a giant movie came up and it was a great opportunity,
like you got to go to Santa Fe for 6 weeks to go shoot this movie, we're gone. I'm not going to be at prom. This sucks. I wish I was there. Maybe we can talk to the production and be like, are we shooting that day? Can I fly home?
I mean, if for example, we're working with your college friend, Seth, who is invested in our 2-man show. Look, there's a world where we get to do it here out somewhere in LA, a theater near LA, and we do that for a month. And then if things go well and it goes the way we hope.
Success is going on Broadway, is doing it on Broadway.
So then you move to New York for a month, 2 months, 3 months. We haven't had to deal with that in our lives so far in this business. And so that'll be an adjustment. We'll have to deal. Our families will have to deal with that. And we take that very seriously. Like, and someone might be like, well, that and, $6 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but like
$6,
us caring, $7.
Thank you. Is it pumpkin spice season?
It is. The fact that it's hard for us to leave, your family's like, yeah, great. It's harder on us. But we do take it seriously, and we do look for every possible way to not miss important things. And I think we've been
latest flight out, earliest flight back, right? You're back like at
So we're the ones who are out doing stand up until 2 in the 1 in the morning, getting paid. You're on this incredible high from doing a show. You know what it's like.
You
know
have
what it's like
to
to come
go
off
out
a show.
You have to go out with the group of people afterwards.
Right. You have a drink to thank everyone for the weekend. You settle up with the club. You hang out. You come back to your hotel room. It's 2 in the morning. You pack up your stuff. You lay down, and you're like, car's picking me up at 4. Now it's 3:15. Am I going to try and sleep for 45 minutes? No. So you lay there and you sort of panic. You get to the airport. You get in. Get on the plane. You have the worst sleep where your head's bobbing up and down and you're feeling awful. You're on like an hour and a half sleep. You come home. And then you're like, oh, I got to caddy my daughter's golf tournament today for 6 hours out in the sun. But I wouldn't miss it. But if I took a later flight, I wouldn't be able to be there for the tournament. Then I miss the whole tournament. So I'll bear I'll suffer. I'll have the bad sleep for 2 nights, and it'll affect me for 2 days. But like, that's the balance we have to strike.
The nature of your career is that you have to keep working, that you haven't had this one big hit that you could retire on,
right,
and you have to keep kind of churning and hustling. However, at the same time, you're like of the lucky few, like the 1% of people in this world that have pursued what you're doing and are successful at it. So whereas they're the 0.1% who have what you're describing, you're pretty lucky for what you're doing. But I wonder, living that lifestyle and knowing that if you were to stop, then maybe this all goes away. If you're not consistently doing that, does that create a certain amount of anxiety in terms of security in the morals?
All of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's funny. I was talking to my friend yesterday, and we were just talking about like, he's going through. He's a very funny person. He's collaborated with us on projects and whatnot, and I really trust him. He's just a good friend. And I was talking to him, and he's like, because I'm like, oh man, this project went away, and this thing that we thought was going to happen this month may happen in the winter. It's just stressing me out, because it comes into question. It's like if you were to like get a toe amputated or something, you're like, well, this is foretelling my death. This is like one little piece of me that's dying. And you're like, well, if this project goes away and then this goes away, is this foretelling a trend that like we're no longer viable? You get those fears and whatnot. He's like, you just can't live in the fear. You got to live in what you just described, which is like, you are part of the 1% of people that are doing exactly what you want to do. You call the Laugh Factory and say, hey, can we hop up on and do shows this week? Yes. And you get fulfilled by standing on the stage. Now, are you making enough money to put your kid through college by doing those 2 sets at the Laugh Factory? No, you're not. But you're standing on the stage being fulfilled in an emotional and creative sense that like, a lot of people, for whatever reason.
No, we say this all the time. We've made this analogy before, and I think it's relevant, and I think it basically sums it up. We are on a ladder, okay? And in order to climb a ladder, you have to look up. I mean, that's what we do naturally.
You got a face full of butt.
You're up in someone else's ass.
Up into someone's butt.
But also you're acutely aware of all the people who are above you on the ladder.
And if you're not up there,
if you're climbing the ladder, you rarely are taking a moment to look back down and see all the people who are on the ladder below you.
Staring at your butt.
Right, staring at your butt. All the people who are in line to get onto the ladder, and then the line wraps around a corner, and there's a bunch of people waiting in line that they don't even know what they're waiting for. And then there's a bunch of people who walk by the line and say, I wish I had the guts to get into that line. So not to like, we shouldn't pause and give ourselves flowers every 5 minutes, but there is a notion of, if you can acknowledge where you are in the order and how hard you've worked to get to this place every once in a while, then you can get out of your cycle of anxiety about the next thing or these 3 things that went away. And yes, it's stressful. It's so funny because Rainey and I would say this about people. Why do we connect with certain people in this business? There are certain like massively successful actors and comedians who we immediately feel connected to. And then there are people who are maybe a notch below, not even as successful, but who have led such a charmed existence all the way up that we have nothing to say to them. If you haven't stood at the abyss of your future and your career and said to yourself, why am I doing this?
I'm not going to make it.
I'm not making this. This was a mistake. What the F do I do? I'm giving up. And then right before you give up, you're like, well, I can't. This is what I do.
Try this.
Let me try this. And that works a little. And then you're like, I'm off the edge. And then you're back on the edge. And then you're off the edge. It's all about that, like, then I have something to say to you. Then we can have a conversation. We can relate to each other. If you've just been like born a mile away from the edge and you keep going off the edge up into a mountain, into a mansion up on a hill that's 1,000,000 miles from the edge and you never see the edge, I don't know what to say to you. I really don't. I have nothing to say to you.
Can't share it.
So it sounds like there's a certain amount of fear and anxiety and hunger that comes from that.
Yeah.
That drives what you do, but then it's the gratitude that keeps you from getting too.
Finding the gratitude and finding the pleasure in the small things that you're doing, just taking a step back and being like, all right, this is amazing. Like, we just created this material. We just came up with this idea. We just put it on stage. We're developing this show idea that we really love. Lord knows the industry right now is like
A TV show.
TV show. They're not buying anything. This is the message that comes out. Nobody's buying anything. No one's making anything. Forget it. Well, I mean, we still have to come up with ideas, and we still have to. Do we like this idea? We love this idea. Do we see it as something that could get made? Absolutely. That's all the control we have. Like, whatever happens to it is really out of our control. We just have to love that. Okay, we like this idea. This idea was brought. This specific idea that we're working on right now was kind of brought to us, and then we filled it in, and then we reached out to a friend of ours who's a really talented writer who we worked with 20 years ago on a pilot, and he was like, yeah, I want to work on it. And then every time we get together and work with him and his partner, we always leave those sessions feeling better about ourselves and better about the creative process and better than when we started that day. And that's fulfilling and wonderful. And in the end, we're going to have this really great idea that we're going to go out and try and sell. We'll see what happens. I mean, nothing would make me happier than just to be working on that and getting paid money to work on that idea to try and ultimately make it come to life.
Where this business is, you're all trapped in like a cave and you have to dig your way out. And some people get shovels and some people get bulldozers, and we have tiny teaspoons. And so but you have a spoon. You're not without the ability. And if we didn't have spoons, we'd scrape with our hands. Like, that's what we can do. We can still make a dent. We can still carve. It might take us longer. It might make the thing seemingly impossible, and we may never get out to the point which we had hoped we had gotten to. Meanwhile, someone's with a bulldozer, handed a bulldozer, and they can go straight out of the cave in 5 minutes.
But what's so cool is that you guys have found, we talked about, the novelty of twin comedians, but also, like, I think back to when I first became aware of you guys with Cheap Seats. And even then I remember thinking, like, wow, the connection of comedy and sports, like you and like Nick Bakay were the only guys doing, like, you know what I mean? Like that you guys found this lane that was so unoccupied. It was like a vacuum. Was that a conscious choice to like connect sports? Because it's obviously worked out in terms of Cheap Seats, Jim Rome and stuff, the NFL Network, all the stuff, Jose Oquendo's Utility Closet. You guys are sort of the go-to comics when it comes to sports and things like that. Was that
Yeah, we loved sports so much growing up, and we always thought that people took it so seriously. It's like the biggest magic trick in the world because people think it's so high stakes. Sports. If we don't win, I'm gonna die if we don't win. You're
guy who takes the plasma TV off the wall and smack. Like, bro, it's like a game.
Yeah, but but on some level, I get that guy.
It's like a horror movie. A horror movie's not real, but if it does scare you to a point where you're like terrified.
It's high stakes. I was playing golf yesterday, and I got so mad at a shot that I threw my 3-wood and broke it. So now I have to get a new shaft for the thing, but like, I know in my brain it doesn't matter what I just did. That was the cumulative of me feeling like I'm not doing what I want to do. But like, why couldn't I control myself in that moment? And so like, that sports gets people, whether you play it, whether you're watching it, you're rooting for your team, whatever, people get just crazy.
They
about
go to
it.
that part of your brain
They
that
just
you can't
they
control.
You see red and you just can't control it. We found that to be funny in terms of like people having a blind spot and not knowing. So that could be made fun of in so many different ways. And that could be the lens, the prism with which we shoot all of our comedy about everything. And so like Mystery Science Theater took a look at all dumb, terrible movies and all the bad choices that are made in those, we thought, man, maybe we can do this for old, weird, and terrible, like the sports that lived in the archives of ESPN. And
But I will say, the reason why I think Cheap Seats was successful and other attempts at doing comedy and sports have not been successful, as a consumer of those products, like we never wanted to see other sports comedy shows fail, but I can tell you why they didn't succeed, because we set out to do a comedy show that stood shoulder to shoulder with The Daily Show, with 30 Rock, with Chappelle's Show, with
whether
Conan.
it did that is not up.
That's not up to us to decide. But some people would say, yeah, I watch, even if they just said, I watch your show and I watch Conan. I watch your show and I watch The Daily Show. I watch your show and Family Guy. I watch your show, South Park. I watch your show and Chappelle's Show. Those are in Key and Peele. Those are the shows I watch, right? If someone said that to us, then we say, okay, that's what we're going for. Sports is the backdrop. We'll get the sports part right.
Yeah.
We'll get that right. More important to us than getting the sports part right is getting the comedy to the highest level.
So I think what we didn't realize that I also think is really important is that it was, and this is when we've realized it, two guys on a couch hanging out, just hanging out with people at home. It was very much like we're hanging out with you. And because we're twins and because you immediately understand that we're brothers, people watching would be like, oh, they've been doing this since they were little together. We're now getting a chance to kind of watch them.
Yeah, you almost have like exposition and backstory without even having to say one word.
Because these two guys who look alike are on this couch watching these shows.
They were probably doing this when they were 12 years
12,
old.
13, 14,
We're
forever.
getting a chance to watch them do it as adults, but this has been something they've been doing forever. And because we're twins, it works. We don't have to say, I look like you and we're twins. We don't have to say any of it. It's just there. It exists and that's the way it is. And so we realized that later, and we realized the closeness we had with the audience when it was taken away from us, because in the second season, they were like, we're going to put a studio audience in. And we're like, why? Because we need to hear laughter along with the jokes. We're like, no, you don't. You're missing the point of the show. We're like, fine, we'll try and do it. And in doing so, we got a couple of people to write on it, John Glazer being one of them, who's really talented. And we asked him, and we're so happy he decided to say yes, because it was a job in New York and it was really fun. And we got to be really close with him, I'll never forget that time. It was wonderful. But in doing it, all of our fans who watched the show and loved it were like, what are you doing? We never got one even scintilla of a negative email ever until they made us do this, which then harkened back to something that Jon Stewart told us years ago when we were about to do our MTV show. He said, always make sure.
We went bowling with him.
With him and our buddy Mike Dugan, who was a showrunner on his old talk show. Okay, his MTV talk show before it went to UPN. And then Mike was the showrunner and executive producer on our show Apartment 2F. And Jon Stewart said, okay, before you do this, I just want you to know this is going to be a crazy time in your life that you're going to now. We were bowling at University Lanes over on 12th and University.
Was it Bowlmore?
Bowlmore Lanes.
Bowlmore Lanes. University Place in 11th. Take the elevator upstairs.
Take the elevator upstairs.
You
we're
know
bowling with him. And John was like, just make sure the mistakes you make are your own, because you can live with those if they're your mistakes. If someone else makes a mistake and it is hoisted and foisted upon you, then like, you're not going to be happy with that. And that's exactly what happened in this instance. And we went to the executive who was in charge, who really listened to us. I love this guy, Crowley Sullivan. He later went on to the UFC and he did The Nosebleeds, which was a reboot of that show. He brought it back for us. He's been so good to us. I love him. I want to shout him out. Crowley Sullivan, we said, dude, we have never gotten a bad email about this show ever. It's like only been positive all the way through. Here's a stack of emails of people being like, why did you ruin my favorite show? And here's why. And we said, one of the reasons is you put an audience in and suddenly we're performing for the audience and we're not hanging out with the people at home. It should just be two guys on a couch hanging out with you at home, and that's the charm of it. You don't need to hear laughter. They're laughing at home, and even if they're not, they feel like they're on the couch with us. And so we got through to him, and he fought and got the audience taken out and allowed us to go back and re-edit all the jokes in the actual thing or take out the audience laughter. So it just was only in those segments in between where there was an audience there, and it was like a 6-episode blip on a 77-episode thing. And I grant him so much for doing that, but it helped us understand so much about that connection in that show. And again, it's like people who loved sports, but there were people who didn't love sports. People were like, I hate sports, but my dad loves sports. And this was the one show that I could sit down.
Right. This is the only thing I watched with my dad. Or this is the only thing I watched with my brother or my sister who watches sports, and we don't have anything in common except we both like comedy and we like the show. Then we went back to ourselves and we're like, yeah, we made a comedy. We made a comedy that's about sports instead of a sports comedy. And it's a very subtle twist of what those two things are. But
why did I say twist at the same time? We
Well,
became
so
those
we're-
when our mother was in the bush
and she
then
was
she
but
jumped
like,
in the
and I think what it comes back to, and all of it comes back to our attitude about being twins and our attitude about comedy and our attitude about our type of comedy, the show that we did. We spend so much time thinking about it and really, really trying to be intentional and really trying to not just do the thing that will get the most laughs, or specifically do the thing that would get the most laughs for a reason. Everything has a reason. If we can be super, super thoughtful and intentional and mindful about what we're doing, then we feel like we're doing something we can be proud of. Maybe it's not the easy sell. Maybe if we dressed exactly alike and played guitars, we could be the new Smothers Brothers or whatever. And maybe that would have been way like a ticket to like more success.
Maybe that was our bulldozer to get out of the cave.
But I don't know if we would emotionally and personally be happy with that. I think we've chosen a harder path, one that we're like, of course, in our minds, we're like, is it going to work out? I hope it works out. I think it's worked out.
But that's what my friend was saying yesterday on the phone when I was talking to him. He's like, it has worked out. Are you joking? It's 100% worked out. You're getting to try these things. You're getting to do these things. You're in this spot that you described. That like a lot of times we don't see ourselves in that 1%. We're like, we're still struggling to try and make it, and it may not work out. And he's like, it's already worked out. To get that philosophy, you're spending too much time thinking about like the negative of it not doing it. You have to just 100% just focus on the fact that you're doing it, and it's awesome.
I wonder, and I would just want to ask you one more question, and I'll get you guys out of here. Given the fact that you describe, starting out, you're sort of like these two 12-year-olds on a couch, and really you're thinking about sports and being funny, and it's very simple. There's sort of a full circle moment, it feels like, happening where
We're sitting on a couch right now trying to be funny.
Yeah, hello.
He's inside of me. He's right here.
Well, the two-person, one-man show, you're sort of, and you're going back to your childhood and reflecting on your life. I've seen this model before with comedians who were very silly and funny. You look at like, I think Billy Crystal did a thing about his childhood. I'm wearing it.
Yeah.
700 Sundays, I think is what it was.
I shorted him 200 Sundays. Sorry.
Yeah, God, why are you cutting
So
so
many
many Sundays on this
Sundays.
guy?
Jeez.
Why are you doing that?
So I wonder, when you do something like that, it's very intentional. I think all of us, our priorities change as we get older. And when you're in middle adulthood, middle age, whatever you want to call it, your priorities are different than when you're in your
Totally.
20s, when you're starting out a
Agreed.
career, right? So as much as you're in this place where you're still wanting to do the kind of humor you've always done, and you're wanting to just continue to do the shows and talk about stupid shit and sports and whatever, have your priorities changed, and the way that you approach your art, if you want to call it,
Yeah, absolutely.
of course we do.
is it evolving? Are you at a different place now? Are there priorities that are different?
Yes.
That's a great
It's a
question.
great question. I think, yes. I think the first 5 years or 8 years of a comedian's life or comedy team's life is you just want to be funny. You're trying to
Find your voice.
be funny. You're not even on the
Oh,
voice yet, but it's part of it.
Just
You
like-
don't realize you're building it, but yes.
You're grasping for
You're
everything.
whatever's funny. You're sounding like the comedians you love, and you're imitating in some ways, and some of the styles, but unknowingly you're doing the things that you find funny, but you're just trying to be funny with no care of like whether this bit matches this bit or this thing is like this or whatever. You're just like, can I get to a funny 15, 20 minutes so I can go up at Stand Up New York or Caroline's? Can I get to a funny 40 minutes of original material if I can here or there. Then it's like, can I get to 45 minutes so I can go on the road and headline? Who cares what the message of all the comedy is?
Not to interject, but I'll give you an example. So I saw this comedian, because we just have a lot of comedy that rolls through our social media. I saw this guy, young dude, was wearing like a Portland Trailblazers jersey, no shirt underneath. You know, like the guys who show up at NBA game with just the jersey on, as if like everybody, like if everybody breaks their leg, they're like, get that guy up there who just works out
the Kevin Duckworth jersey,
his upper body, bring him down.
He just works out his upper body.
He didn't wear a shirt underneath it. He can do Tree Rollins. Wonderful. May he rest in peace.
Chuck Robinson.
So this guy's bit that he was doing, and this was so much a bit that we would do like when we were younger. And it was just, he said, me and my friends will just sit around our apartment or wherever, and I'll name an NFL player, and then someone has to name what college he came from. So he just did that. He was like, I mean, you know, Christian McCaffrey, and someone, and then someone in the crowd shouted out, and everybody laughed.
Stanford, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, so-and-so, he named someone. Then he named like like Eric Decker, and like people just kind of stood there for a second.
Iowa.
And no, and he was like, and someone was like, Minnesota. He's like, let's go. It was funny, but you're like, and I think that's funny, but I'm like, that's the bit that this guy is doing right now. When he gets older and more advanced, if he advances further in this, and he's getting laughs. I mean, it's funny. I saw it. I was like, it made you guys laugh. It was funny, and his energy was what was funny. As he gets older and as he gets more into this business, that guy will, the funnier bit to me is how he reflects back on how he used to do that versus that it's a bit about how much time he had. And then it's like, what am I doing right now versus that? I want to go back to that time. Or this is what we did. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean that we're just sitting around and saying
Or saying like, it's not that I don't love my wife. It's that I wait for her to go to sleep, and then I call my friends and we play the game we used to play 20 years ago, which is this.
So
and I wish I could play that game with my wife,
but I can't. And the whole bit is, there's some things you just do with your friends, and there's some things you can do with your wife. Like if I said to my wife, Eric Decker, she'd be like, is that the guy who's coming by to fix the refrigerator? You know what I mean? Whatever it is. Like that.
Or the fact that my wife knows, but also it's not as dumb and funny to her, or it's super funny to her and I keep wanting her to play with their friends, but she doesn't want to, or whatever the dynamic is, to explore that dynamic to say what's more about the human condition.
It deepens it rather than just saying a person and having the audience shut it out. But I'm not down on that person. I think it was funny, and
it's great. That's where you are. So you're just trying to do funny things. Then 10 years after that, you're like, okay, you start working on your voice. This is why we say to people, when people ask us all the time, I want to go, my son wants to go into stand-up comedy. He's going to give you a call. And we say, okay, what do I need to do to get in stand-up comedy? What they're saying is, yeah, what do I need to do? You're like, you need 20 years. Do you want to spend your next 20 years doing it? Because that's what you need. There are no shortcuts in comedy. You know, we know people who are great stage presence. There are a lot of people, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to badmouth anyone.
But two people who like fought through and years and years and years of doing it, and not at the level that they're doing it right now, but are on huge now and didn't come out of nowhere, Sebastian Maniscalco and Bill Burr. Bill Burr was on our MTV show back in 1997. He did stand up on our MTV show, and we loved him. He was great. Was he Bill Burr the way he is right now? No. And it took him so long to get to that place. And now he's just at this like elite upper echelon level that he's unlocked all the things about him that are funny. He knows how to be funny. He knows how he can be funny. He knows his voice. He understands what he's saying. He's saying really interesting things. He's pushing the envelope. He's pushing the audiences into places. Everything is working. He's like, again, he's like Tom Brady surveying the field, running through all of his progressions in like a split second. He's at that level. Sebastian's another guy. Like I remember being at the Comedy Store in like the early 90s, and Sebastian would come out there and
at midnight,
and there'd be like 5 people in the room, and he's doing exactly what he would do in front of an arena, in front of 5 people, the same
physicality
and everything.
Mannerisms.
Nothing. And that was not because...
Not even nothing. Like the audience liked it.
They liked it, but it like wasn't, like again, if someone's like Sebastian's here doing a set, like the place packs up. But what he just stayed with it, and he kept consistent, and he was doing his thing, and he kept finding. So like, again, and I think back to the things he was doing, it was his persona. But as he sort of grew as a comic and figured out where his sweet spot is, the things he's saying and the things he's saying about life and the things he comes down on are far more relatable.
So after those 10 years, the second 10 years, where you really develop your voice and you weed out things that don't fit you and that don't fit what you're trying to say, and then you sort of develop a voice. Then in the next 10 years, you're like, what am I saying about the world? What am I contributing to the overall comedic conversation on the larger level? And then we're in our fourth decade of doing comedy. We started when we were 14 and we're 53. We're almost in our 40 years of doing comedy. It's insane. But part of what we are trying to do with comedy shows that we do, like tag it shows, where we get on stage and we have comics come on and we tag their jokes and we give them the tags, they take them with them. It's a really cool collaborative style of doing comedy where they do the whole set and we're in the notes section of our phone typing up tags.
Listening and writing at the same time. It's such two crazy skills.
And you pitch them the tags afterwards and they can take them with them. Why do we do that? Because Randy and I believe that comedy should be a community. We believe that we should help each other. We believe that
the best part about comedy is Dulce Sloan coming last night
and us having fun and joking with her and hanging out afterwards, talking to Jeff Ross and giving him a giant hug, helping another comic who's
doing karaoke in New Orleans with all the comics who came to see our show at this very small, cool place called Sports Drink. And then all of us going to this other place later and doing like karaoke later. And it was like super fun. We're having a great time with all these comics.
Lifting up comedic voices. So
that
we're
kind
like,
of I don't mean to interrupt you, but that kind of subverts the concept or the idea that like comics are all tortured, like, angry, like the old model of like, we're going to do blow after the show and then we're all miserable. You know what I mean?
Right. Some are, for
and
sure. There are definitely some who are.
And that, by the way, that is the source of their power.
Yeah.
Like you understand that. You say to yourself, oh my God, you're this way off stage too, and this is why
you live off of anger, and the anger fuels your writing, and that fuels your persona.
And you're great. I mean, I'd be like, you're such a great comic, but I fear for you in terms of in the world,
in your mental health. But if we're like, what if we left the comedy business, the business that we're in a better place? What if we didn't just show up to the rec room and use it and split? What if we make it nicer? What if we make it more comfortable? What if we engender a world where comics give each other tags long after we're out of this business? What if we change? That's the thing that you never think you have the capacity of. At the beginning, when you're getting into comedy, you're like, please just let me be able to get on stage and be funny. Then you're like, please let me just be part of the established comedy world. Then you're like, please let me rise to the highest level I can rise within this professional comedy world. And then if you're lucky enough to be around more, we can say, how can we leave this comedy world different than when we walked in? Can we make it better? Can we make it more of a community? Can we make people care about each other, or at least in the time that we were there?
And like the people who love us would be like the comedians and people who audience are like, oh, those guys were great. They gave me so many tags and they were so generous with this and that. I loved doing their shows. I loved hanging out with them. Those guys were so much fun. I loved it. And they made everything better when they were around.
And people hate us or like,
yeah, I hate those guys.
Hate them. They suck. And there'll always be people like that.
Always
so you'll never win the whole world over. You got to be smart.
You can't win it all.
You can't. You have to be conscious of what the reality is.
But in the end, people will be like, that's what these guys left. They made this. It was better when they were in it and better when they were here.
I wish there was more of that philosophy in every industry, every part of this world.
Agreed.
That's a great place to wrap up, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
It was fabulous.
So fun. Thank you, guys.
Not knowing when this episode is going to come out, but obviously they can check you guys out at supersklars.com.
Supersklars.com has all of our dates. If you go to our tour dates, follow us on every platform whatever you choose to. We do literally put new content up every day on, certainly every weekday, but then other times too on Instagram. It's at Sklar Brothers, brothers written all the way out. It's at Sklar Brothers on everything. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want, Twitter, X, whatever you want to do. It's at Sklar Brothers. And that's a great way to say, hey, we got shows coming up. And we do a show every month called Tag It, which we just described in LA. Next one's, if this drops before, is May 21st. It's a Wednesday night, and it's going to be a great show with our friend Dulce Sloan, Jay Moore, Dean Del Rey, Dan Van Kirk. So it's going to be fun.
And people can always listen to Dumb People Town.
Yes, that's our podcast.
With Dan Van Kirk.
It's free. It's wonderful. It's like if you want good, dumb comedy about dumb people doing dumb things, usually from Florida. It's not political. If you need 45 minutes to just give your brain a rest from what the world is throwing at you, that is what this podcast is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The Sklar Brothers have been our guests on this episode of the Heartbreed Podcast. Check out new episodes every Tuesday. Remember to breathe. See you next time on the Heartbreed Podcast.